Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be discussing 10 NHL players who will retire in 2020. Now heading into 2020, I think there's a lot of NHL players who are just quite on the verge of retirement. But which 10 players do I see retiring in the calendar year of 2020, and which players do I see as most likely to retire? Watch till the end for all my predictions, and of course subscribe if you're new. Now heading into the top 10, and the first player who I think will retire in 2020, I'm going to go with Dustin Byfuglien. Now the Winnipeg Jets defenseman, or former Winnipeg Jets defenseman, is in a really wacky situation right now. Earlier he was suspended by the team for not actually being with the team, and of course right now it's pretty much just a waiting game to see what he ends up doing. He went in rehab, he's trying to get back to things, but I think the most likely thing is him just retiring this season and not coming back to the NHL. Now at age 34, there is still an okay chance that he could end up coming back to the Jets, but even if he does come back to the Jets this season, I think he's pretty much confirmed to retire after this season. Even if he comes back, I think this will be his last hurrah, his last go of it, because I think he is leaning towards retirement. Right now, again, it is just a waiting game, but if I had to predict anything, I think 2020 will be the year that he'll go away from hockey. Now going on to the second player who I think will retire in 2020, it's a little bit more of an obvious one to me compared to Dustin Byfuglien, but I'm going to go with Craig Anderson, the Ottawa Senators goaltender. Now Craig Anderson, the 38-year-old American, will turn 39 this offseason, so the guy is definitely getting up there in age. And his production, of course, has gone down over the past couple of years, and I feel like this year is pretty much the last go of it until Anders Nilsson takes the whole starter job in Ottawa. Now it's really convenient that he's on the last year of his pretty big deal, which pays him $4.7 million. He'll be a UFA after this season. But even if a contending team wants him as a backup or something, as a rental, I still think he'll end up retiring after this year and going and focusing on his family. Again, he's about to be 39 years old, obviously on the tail end of his career, and it's not like the Ottawa Senators are going too far anyways. I think it just makes perfect sense for Ottawa and for him too. Now going on to the third player who I think will retire in 2020, I'm going to be a little bit honest with you guys, it's a little more of an up in the air one. I'm not 100% sure on this pick, but I'm still going to go with Jason Spezza. Now the Leafs center at age 36, of course, signed that minimum league deal, 1-year deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think it is more likely than not that he ends up hanging the skates up and retiring after this season, no matter what ends up happening. Now, the reason I don't see it as 100% likely, or even more likely than some of the other players in this list, is because he's playing fairly well with Toronto. In 28 games, he has 5 goals, 10 assists for 15 points. Not bad whatsoever, especially at his age, and especially for how he played in the last couple of years in Dallas. Now, I still think it's more likely that he ends up retiring, but let's say Jason Spezza wins a cup or something crazy unlikely in Toronto. I don't know, he might end up staying there, but I think the retirement is more likely in my opinion. I think it was more of just a 1-year, last career deal, just to call it quits afterwards, whether he wins a Stanley Cup or once again loses in the first round. Now going from a player in Jason Spezza who isn't 100% likely to a player that I think everybody knows is going to retire after this year, that being Zdeno Chara of the Boston Bruins. Now at age 42, he usually defies our expectations. I mean, I thought he would have retired like 2 years ago, but the guy is still trucking, still being an okay defenseman, but I think this is the last year for him. And Boston has one of the best chances of anybody to win the Stanley Cup. I think this will be his last year, his last hurrah, and he'll go out swinging, whether Boston wins the cup or once again ends up disappointing. Now the main problem here is that he's still a pretty big part of this Boston team. He's played over 20 minutes of time on ice on average this season and is still a big time defenseman for them. But it's obviously obvious and apparent that his skills are dwindling. He isn't what he used to be, even if he is still a pretty solid NHL defenseman. But he is the oldest player in the NHL, sitting at age 42. I think it's just a matter of time before he ends up retiring. Even if he does defy expectations, proves me wrong once again, and plays another year, I'm going to predict him to retire next year, because that's just what happens. It's almost an annual tradition at this point that Zdeno Chara is going to retire every single season. and I'm here for it. And now getting into the halfway points in my top 10 and going to my 5th player who I think will retire in 2020. It's a lot more on the obvious side of things, especially compared to Zdeno Chara, but I'm still going to have my boy Jumbo Jorthorn. Unfortunately, I think it'll be the case that he does end up retiring without a Stanley Cup, and it freaking sucks. But with the way that San Jose is playing this year, I'm not even sure if they'll have him as a rental, if they'll sell him to another team. I sure hope so, because I want and need to see him win a Stanley Cup, but I think he will retire with San Jose, and with the way San Jose's season is going, likely miss the playoffs. Now, it was obvious, especially with this past free agency, that he was pretty much on his last legs. He, a couple of months into free agency, just barely signed with the San Jose Sharks, a one-year deal, $2 million deal, to just have one last hurrah with San Jose. He thought they'd be a great team, a playoff team, and a great chance of winning the Stanley Cup, which I thought too as well. So far, that has not been the case. San Jose has been bad, and Joe Thorne's production has not been all that great. And unless he goes to a rental team and somehow wins the Stanley Cup, I don't see him having too much of a future in the NHL, which is a pretty freaking big shame. Now moving on to my 6th player who I think will retire and hang up the skates in 2020. I'm going to go with my second goaltender in this list, that being Oilers backup Mike Smith. Now Mike Smith has had a pretty weird season with the Edmonton Oilers. He's been the starter, the backup, and everything in between, but I think this is his last year. He's going to be 38 in the offseason. He has 1 year left on his deal. Basically this season he'll be a UFA in free agency, and I think this is his last hurrah almost. He might sign as like a minimum league deal backup goalie, but I think that is the most he'll achieve next year. And unless he gets like a starting job or a backup job with like a contending team or something, I don't really see there being too much of a reason for him to be in the NHL more. I mean, he hasn't really been all that great since like 2016, and his numbers haven't been good since then. It's obvious he's on the downhill of his career, and it just has not gone his way. Unfortunately, I just don't see it as too likely that there'll be too much interest in him anyways, because he hasn't been good in pretty much forever. But the guy that got the goal in the empty net, he's still a legend, and if he is going to win a Stanley Cup, it better be now. Also, this man is trying to win a Stanley Cup and be on the Oilers at the same time, which we know is not working for you, bud. Get the heck out of here. What are you doing? Oilers? Cup? Bro, just go to the freaking Capitals or something. Get the heck out. And moving on, my 7th player who I think will go out and retire in 2020, I'm going to pick Devils captain Andy Greene. Were you expecting any analysis about that? I mean, he's 37 years old. He kind of sucks. Yeah, that's about it. He'll retire. Book it. And now on to one of the more slam dunks in this top 10. Going into my 8th player who I think will retire in 2020, I'm going to go with Ryan Miller. Now, the Anaheim Ducks backup goalie is at age 39, and he's going to be 40 in basically 1 year. I mean, the guy, I don't know what he's with him for the Ducks right now, but hopefully he just finds a way on a contending team. Maybe a contending team uses him as a backup goalie. But right now I don't see too much left in Ryan Miller. He had a pretty good stint earlier with the Anaheim Ducks in the past couple of years, but it's obvious that he's 39 years old and he's playing like it thus far. And in 11 games at Anaheim, he doesn't have the greatest numbers. He has a 3.21 goals against average and a .901 save percentage. Yikes on a Donna stick. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say at this point. Those are not the greatest numbers, but I think a contending team would use him, especially if he does come cheap. He will be a UFA after this year, and I think he's about $2 million, so it is a little bit of an expensive one. But if the Anaheim Ducks were to give him up for maybe a pick or two, I think some teams would definitely like to see that. Again, as a backup goalie, he has a lot of experience. He's a great character guy, and he's just an awesome guy in general. He's a guy that will be solid for you, but I still think will likely retire as he goes into free agency. And now getting into the 9th player, who I think will retire in 2020, getting on the tail end of our list here today. At number 9, I'm going to go with Brent Seabrook. Now, Seabrook at age 34 is still on a super huge, gigantic contract. But with the surgery that will take him out throughout the rest of the year, on top of all the injury troubles and all the struggles he's already had, I really don't see Brent Seabrook returning in any sizable way for Chicago. Maybe he comes back as like a coach or a trainer or something in the organization, but on the ice playing with the Blackhawks, I just don't see. Now, this is very convenient for the Chicago Blackhawks, who have 5 more years left on that Brent Seabrook contract. And it's sort of like the same situation as the Marian Hossa contract, which was huge as well. And then he had the equipment allergy, which was very all of a sudden and very weird. And with Brent Seabrook, it's less on that, it's just an injury, but Chicago can basically dump him at this point and make him as a consultant or something in the organization as a supplement that kind of contract. But I see that being that way. It might not even be to his choice. I think the injuries are plaguing him. I think he wants to be with the Blackhawks, obviously. But with his play declining so freaking rapidly and him having that huge contract and on top of this injury, again, I just don't see it as likely that he comes back and skates again. I think he goes back to the Blackhawks organization in some way, but just not on the ice. Now, keeping up with the trend of the Chicago Blackhawks and getting into my final and 10th player who I think will retire in 2020, I'm going to go with a little bit of a hot take here. That being Corey Crawford. Now, Corey Crawford has 1 year left on his deal at $6 million, being a UFA after this season. But with Chicago also having Robin Lehner as a UFA after this year, they're going to want to put up all their focus on him. And when it comes to Corey Crawford, his whole, it's just shenanigans over the past couple years. There's a lot of stuff happening with him. We've seen multiple injuries of vertigo, concussions, history as well, that at this age, I just don't think personally it's worth it for him to continue playing the NHL. But obviously he's been doing that this season and it's been his choice. But after this season, I really don't see there as much of an incentive to stick with Chicago and still be put in dangerous positions on the ice as a goaltender. That's a position where I think he should, for his health, be off the ice and just like Brent Seabrook, possibly be in the organization somehow. Now, the thing is, unlike Brent Seabrook, who could make the case that Corey Crawford still has it. He was one of the better goaltenders in the league earlier this season, and his play has definitely dropped down, especially compared to Robin Lehner, who is soaring right now. But he was playing relatively well to start the year, and then, of course, some of the injury troubles came back to him. But he is still playing at this point. But the thing is, with Corey Crawford, again, I think when he had the vertigo initially and had those concussion issues, I personally thought he should have just hung him up, just continued with his family, and made sure that he had a healthy life afterwards. If right now playing is in the way of preventing that, then he should not be playing in the NHL. But if he wants to stay with the Blackhawks, I think that is maybe the best for both sides. He has a lot of leadership skills, has been there for a long time as well in the organization, and I think him retiring makes sense for him as well as Chicago. That's a team that will have been led by Robin Lehner for the future, and Corey Crawford will be there to help too. With my top 10, that's where you guys come in. Let me know down in that comments down below what you think about my 10 players who will retire picks, what you agree and disagree with, and of course the question on to you, which NHL player do you think will retire in 2020? But if y'all want a video just like this one, y'all should click on this card right here where I discuss 10 NHL players who will be traded in 2020. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys had enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below your thoughts on my picks, what you agree and disagree with. Share this video with your friends. Get the word out there. The Grav gang is growing, and the 10 players that'll retire in this one. My name is Nathan, and I'll see y'all next video or stream. Goodbye.